All right, let's get our Facebook folks in here. Start the show. Got the spinning wheels going. 1 and 2. All right, welcome in, welcome in. It is Monday morning, and the sun has set on the 2024 NFL Draft. I am Nick Kendall, and joined by, as always, on these morning shows, Scott Kennedy. Scott, you said it a few times. I think ever since we did these shows, the Falcons and the Broncos are intertwined, kind of seem to be similar, pointing at each other.
There's synergy there, Nick.
Yeah, it's crazy. We're getting all our post-draft grades right now, and of course, I will say this many times, the post-draft grades don't matter. They're a form of content for the sake of content, in my opinion, but God bless them because it gives us stuff to talk about. But Broncos and Falcons both taking a quarterback that, to consensus, may be reached. Obviously, we'll see how that plays out. And because of that, you're seeing a lot of the grades. I think Dane Brugler had the Broncos and the Falcons as the 31st and 32nd graded class, and Kuiper was pretty low on them too. And I think Denver has been in the top 5 in the consensus grades, and Falcons have been bottom 3 in the consensus grades. So we'll see what happens this season, but some weird synergy going on there. And let's say hello to everybody in the chat. We got David coming in here saying, morning, where we picked Bo, people didn't like. However, move back and don't get your quarterback. Rebuild starts with the quarterback, not with any other position on the team. So I'm good with where they took Bo. So an A. See, they got an A from David, so that's great. We got Jeremy coming in. Says, morning, boys. Thought we had a really good draft, including the trade for John Franklin Myers. A 7th rounder seemed like guys that the scouts pound on the table for. Yeah, this year with the new board and everything, I only got to about 100, 150 guys, so I will admit I'd never watched Devon Vale or Nick Garigolo, either of them, but we'll see how they play out. Gonna have to go back and check them out. I like the versatility of Grigolo, and Vale should offer some special teams ability, but have not watched them, full disclosure. Aaron Wagner's in the house. Says, morning, guys. Does it bother anyone else that a ton of mocks had Denver taking Nix at 12, and yet many of those same sites are killing the Broncos on their draft grade, build them up to tear them down? There's a difference between I think Daniel Jeremiah puts it pretty well. He does the mock drafts to be predictive, and he does his big board based on what he sees. So those things can live in isolation. You can pair a guy that makes sense on the surface and still not like the selection, even though you mocked it. So I think those can live in the same world.
Yeah, Aaron, I agree. They're two different things. I had somebody come on here in the comments and basically get after me for the same thing, where last week you said you wouldn't take Nix at 12, and this week you said that you think Nix at 12 all along. I'm like, what I would do and what I think the Broncos are going to do are two very different things. Mm-hmm. Those can be different. So again, it always made sense to me that the Denver Broncos and Sean Payton were going to take Bo Nix at 12. And especially if you believe after the Falcons, you listen to Sean Payton. Sean Payton will say some things that you just don't expect other people to say. And when he basically said the Falcons threw a wrench in everything by taking Michael Penix, he's like, okay, we got a pretty good idea that the Vikings like McCarthy, the Raiders like Penix, and the Broncos, we like Nix. And he actually talked about it. It was interesting. He says, let's get on a conference call and make sure nobody does anything stupid. Let's just sit tight and get your guys. We won't take Penix if you like him. You're going to take McCarthy. Wait, the Falcons did what? That was kind of the reaction around the NFL, including other NFL personnel people, was the Falcons did what? And now all of a sudden you're a little worried about what the Raiders are going to do if they're in the market for a quarterback.
Yep.
Because if you're not, you can trade down. If you think the Raiders are going to take Penix and Nix is still going to be there, you can trade down.
Yeah.
Now you don't have that same sense of sureness about what's going to happen when you're on the clock.
And there are reports the Broncos had a pretty good deal on the table from the Eagles, but once Penix came off the board, that went out the window because they thought they could move back and still have a chance at Nix. And after that, they weren't sure about the Rams, Seahawks, Cowboys, and Raiders as well. So good morning to you, Dave Glassman. And I apologize. I got a little bit of allergies or sore throat coming on here. Kid's not even at daycare yet, and I'm already starting to get that kind of crap going on. I don't know what's going on. We got Dehine coming in, $20. Thank you so much, Dehine. He says, mock draft Monday. All right, 2025. Let's do it. Pull up the simulator, Scott. Says, I'll be at work when this starts, but I wanted to drop off some love for all the insights leading up to the draft and the patience and level-headedness you try to bring Broncos country. You guys are awesome. $20 is nothing to sneeze at, despite my allergies there, Dahine. So thank you so much. We really do appreciate the support. And yeah, thank you guys for joining along in the draft process. We are not always going to be right, of course, but we're going to be authentic and true to our own analysis. So I think that's one thing I really do respect about Scott is he's not going to sugarcoat it or post-draft change his stance based on what's happened. He's like, this is the analysis. It was before, it was after. The only thing that's going to change it is new game tape to analyze. So I appreciate that and appreciate you, Dahine, and the whole community here.
Yeah, when we talk about grades, grades are about the now, the instant analysis for the now. And again, it doesn't matter. They're not going to win you any games. They're just not. And if you want to actually grade a draft class, you look back in 3 years and what do you have? And sometimes it can even take a little bit longer than that, Nick, especially with some of these quarterbacks. You know, where'd Ryan Tannehill end up? You know, you probably get an F for him after 3 years in Miami, and then Tennessee's been pretty happy with him. You know, the RG3 and Kirk Cousins draft. You know, you're probably getting a lot of, wait, why are you taking Kirk Cousins when you just drafted RG3? Well, turned out to be the better pick going down the line. So the grades for the now are entertainment. Now we're going to wait and see. Yep. But again, we'll tell you what we think, and then let's wait and see.
Yep. And I said it on here 100 times, Scott, and Jeremy will make fun of me because I always add it. I wouldn't have taken Nix at 12. I would have been comfortable living in the world where if you traded back, got as much value as was reported offered by the Eagles, and risked losing Nix, so be it. But when you brought in Sean Payton and you gave him over the keys to the roster and the football decisions, the personnel, and he identified Nix as his guy behind reportedly Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, although I've heard mixed things about the second quarterback there, that you have to live with this. And it's not like the 12 overall pick is expensive and there's an opportunity cost there for edge rusher and whatnot, but you also didn't mortgage the future to go get a quarterback that your head coach identified as being a culture fit, a personality fit, an intelligence fit, a skill set fit, a scheme fit, all of the above. So it makes sense on the surface that even if, let's say, if I'm the general manager or a scout and I gave Bo Nix a day 2 grade, but your coach is pounding the table for him, you have all the intangible stuff there, and the coach has the power, you're going to have to be okay living with that 12th pick and seeing who's right in the end. Again, with where the quarterbacks are flying off the board here, day 2 grades going pretty early in this class. I think Penix, McCarthy, and Nix, day 2 grades for a lot of teams, what we're hearing in hindsight here after the draft coming out, but not for Denver in this situation and not for the Broncos. And that's what matters. And clock starts now for Bo Nix and Sean Payton. As soon as you take that quarterback, given the parameters of the value of the rookie quarterback contract, it is flipping the hourglass. So results, they don't have to be 2024, but you need to have obvious positive direction and results probably by 2025.
Now, reading up from Jordan Reed and Matt Miller, a couple guys we like over on ESPN, they were asked, what is your biggest takeaway from this draft? And I've told you one of mine was the rule changes have put so much emphasis on the offense that the offensive players are all going quickly, as it's a 7-on-7 league to a certain extent. That's one of my big overarching takeaways. But tell me, this is interesting. I want to see what you think about this. From Matt Miller, he says, the NFL has a crisis when it comes to quarterback valuation, and because of it, we're seeing more and more passers elevated to round 1 status each year, while the middle class at the position is non-existent. And what he means is 6 guys go in the top 12, and then not another one is picked until the 5th round in 150. So where's the gap? Is the gap that guys are getting pushed too high? That some guys are getting pushed too low? But the middle class at the quarterback position is gone, was his overarching takeaway. And I thought that was really interesting.
And it's one of the reasons that when you look at the overall data, I believe for first round picks at quarterbacks, it's still pretty high variance. It's like, why take a quarterback in the first round? They're only 40% hit rate. Well, it's because if you even have a close to a chance of hitting at quarterback in the last 10 years, you're going round one. Now you're going to have a high bust rate because of that as well, because guys who probably shouldn't be gone are taken there, but the need and the value of quarterbacks is pushing them up. So I do think that probably we'll look back and be like, well, if the starters are going round one, it's because if you even have a chance to fit the requisite tools to be a starting quarterback, somebody's going to take a shot at you. So we'll see how it plays out. There's only been, Hurts, Purdy. I can't think of any other day two starters drafted in the last decade. Dak's got to be approaching a decade, if not already. Russell Wilson's already passed a decade. Kirk Cousins has already passed a decade. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to play out. I know there's a lot of comments that like maybe we finally jump shark as far as the quarterback rookie contract value with some of these guys getting pushed up. But again, what I have to say about the pick and Bo Nix, what Scott has to say about Bo Nix and the valuation, what Kuiper, Brugler, whatever, doesn't really matter because you empowered Sean Payton. He went through the process. He identified Bo Nix as the guy. You're all but married to him now, to making him work out for this regime to be considered a success. And we'll see if Sean Payton is as good of an evaluator of quarterback as he is an elevator of their play.
It's a 3-year window now. The clock, typically you get 3 years as a coach. Now it's a 3-year window. The first one I think was a mulligan. And if the Broncos aren't winning in 3 years, then you will have a new coach, like Sean Payton said last year when they were making the move to bench Russell Wilson. If we don't get this right, you will have someone else up here talking to you. He knows that. Mm-hmm. He doesn't really – there's not a whole lot of risk for him because he'll put about $100 million in the bank. And I think the coaches, I like them being – I get tired of coach speak. I'm like, you're rich beyond your wildest dreams. What's the risk here? What do you think you have to lose?
He's also got a pretty
Sean
good job.
Payton, as you said, it's the legacy on here. Was he all just Drew Brees?
We're gonna find out. The other thing about Payton is that if it doesn't work out for Denver, I'm pretty sure he's got a nice job where he can hear his voice going back to Fox with his connections there after working there for a year. If it doesn't work out in Denver, and be a lot richer. Michael Ronquillo says, "Good morning, Nick and Scott on Broncos for breakfast. Go Broncos." Good to see you, Michael. We got Seth in here, says, "Morning, Broncos country. It's nice to have hope again for the franchise. Got to give this draft a B+. Peyton killed it." I think they did. They took a calculated risk at quarterback, which I understand. They didn't have a lot of top 100 picks, so it's hard to get a lot of value. And while I see a lot of the valuation stuff for the Broncos doing well day 3, I do think that we have to heavily weight the draft based on what we know about day 3. Historical hit rate for day 3, Scott, is bad, obviously, as you know. And this year, a lot of the talk was that this is one of the worst day 3s of the draft class we've seen in a decade. So if Denver can get one single starter out of their day 3 picks, it'll have been a win. If they can get 2.5 contributors, it'll have been a win. But we need to add important context there. You might have done a good job compared to consensus on day 3, but they're still day 3 picks, Scott. DTR, good luck to John Machoa on his rookie quarterback tryout. Yeah, good luck, John. Good to see you, DTR. And we also got Keith Brugman coming in, says, "Good morning, Nick and Scott. Who's a better wide receiver prospect? Last year's Marvin Mims or this year's Troy Franklin?" Marvin Mims. Marvin Mims, more explosive, more, I think, translatable traits, and also the massive floor with the kick return ability as well. So Mims was a better prospect. Franklin, kind of skinny, a little bit one-trick pony, fights the ball a little bit. I always thought that when I seen him go round 1, it was a like in mock drafts, I was like, man, I do not see round 1 for Troy Franklin. I thought mid round 3 to early round 4, which is about where he went in the end. I like him there. Don't get me wrong. I think that's a good pick for the Broncos, but I think a lot of the fantasy football analytics stuff in a wide open Pac-12 offense at Oregon with a massive talent advantage and not a lot of good weapons outside of Franklin, honestly, really stood out for me. So I think Franklin went in the right spot, but Mims, to me, clears him as a prospect.
I have another question for you. Who has the better rookie season, Marvin Mims or Troy Franklin? Because the bar has been set low.
Yeah.
And I know you mentioned special teams, but an all-pro, how many touches do you get as an all-pro punt returner or kick returner? Not a ton. Yeah. So the impact on that, now Marvin Mims could have a better second year with the rule changes, could be more of an impact player there. But I would say, Keith, I expect Troy Franklin to have more of an impact as a receiver than Marvin Mims did as a rookie, because the bar was set incredibly low for Marvin Mims because he didn't really have an impact as a rookie receiver.
I think I'll still go Marvin Mims because I think he has more pathways to the field to contribute.
Rookie, what Marvin Mims has done.
Okay.
So
Okay.
he's already in the clubhouse.
I understand
That's
what
what
you're
I mean.
saying.
Like, the bar has been set low.
Okay. I think you hope that it's Troy Franklin then, because how little you got out of Marvin Mims last season.
Right.
For this season, it's Marvin Mims because he has so many more pathways to contribute, where like Franklin's a little bit more Z vertical guy, where Mims, he can be Z vertical, but also he can be slot, and also he can be a kick returner. So just and gadget. There's just more ways on the field to impact for Mims. Now, again, I think Franklin was a great pick. I mean, I love that Sean Payton, not an early bird. Sean, we're not the same here. Obviously, he would probably not listening to us right now. Normally he does. Sean, how you doing? But he called George Payton that morning saying, we got to go get Troy Franklin. The Broncos do a good trade, honestly, to go get a guy. And I like that pairing Franklin with Nix, especially with the limited CBA stuff. You get a little bit of a jump start, and Franklin seemed to have good energy coming to the Broncos. I love the fire there, but we'll see how it plays out. It's still a day 3 pick. If Franklin ends up being a good wide receiver 3 or 4 on the team, that's a good pick. That's a good pick. I'm not expecting a wide receiver 1, even a wide receiver 2 from him, but with how wide receivers are getting paid, questions in the room, that's a good pick all the same, even if it's not, Denver got a superstar wide receiver here, like some of the very analytic fantasy football people had coming out of Oregon. Troy Morris coming in here says, morning, tell me why the Jets traded John Franklin Myers to the Broncos if he is that good of a player. They need cap space for someone. Are they going to get buffaloed? I love having Nix. Why the hell not? Love that. Thanks, fellas. John Franklin Myers, I guess, requested a trade. So it's coming from the players' side of things, and him and his agent were allowed to go seek out a deal. That's why he was in Denver as the trade was announced that it was happening. Had to pass that physical first. So it's something where he wanted out for more opportunities. The Jets are pretty deep at the position. I'm going to be really curious to see what happens with John Franklin Myers. Probably not a heck of a lot of suitors, also because of taking on so much of that contract. So Denver was able to absorb the contract, also create a new deal for him. I believe $10 million guaranteed this season, Scott. I don't know. It's a 2-year contract that he's coming on, but it's a good get for the Broncos. He kind of dropped off a tad last season, so little red flag there. But you gave up a 2026 6th-round pick. You had the cap space to do it, and you add a strength, relentless pass rusher with versatility to the line, who for the Jets played a lot of 7 technique, would reduce down to 4-3 technique. It sounds like Scott. It's most likely he's going to be the opposite of Zach Allen on the defensive line as more of a 3-4 defensive end. But we'll see how the snaps in the rotation play out. But either way, I mean, raises the floor so much of your defensive line.
Spot Rack has gone premium, so I can't see anything on there. And Over the Cap is not updated in time to see exactly how much dead cap they're eating, et cetera, what it's actually going to cost. So I don't know, which is frustrating as hell. I might have to just go ahead and bite the bullet on getting Spot Rack premium on this, as much as we use it when we're talking.
I do have it
cap.
He gets a new 2-year deal from the Broncos. Is from Jeremy Fowler. $15 million. Deal averages $7.5 million. And he gets a $4 million signing bonus, and he'll receive $8 million fully guaranteed from the Broncos.
So it's a 1-year deal with a 1-year option.
Yep.
So, okay, for a 6th-round pick on a good player, according to Spot Rack, the Jets are eating almost $10 million in dead cap on him, which that's a little, that does seem a little odd. Was it done for cap savings? Well, you ate $10 million dead cap. So I don't know. If you requested a trade and you got a 6 out of it, you didn't really get much cap savings. You didn't get a pick that you can use in the next 3 years, 2 seasons, and it's a 6th-round pick. So it does look. So there's some head scratching in there. Why would the Jets do this guy up? Are they so deep that they can't use him, and you're just trying to avoid a locker room distraction because he wants out? Fills a need for. It's a huge help for the Denver Broncos. It's definitely an upgrade there, just to add, the run stopping ability, et cetera, to the room. He can be the guy that Frank Clark was supposed to be, that you ended up eating dead money on, that never was.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the Jets did make that big move for Hassan Reddick. They drafted Will McDonald last season. They have Jermaine Johnson out there. They've invested really heavily in the defensive line. So one of the better, more highly invested defensive fronts in football. Broncos take advantage of that and get a very useful piece. Now, I'm not saying that John Frankenmeyer is going to be great, but was it 50 pressures over the last 3 seasons? Really good run defender, some versatility on the front. And one thing I love about him is he's a relentless pass rusher. And if you're going against slippery little you-know-whats, like Patrick Mahomes, getting somebody who is unrelenting in their pressure and a pocket cruncher at that, really good get for the Broncos, especially because, I mean, all you gave up is salary cap space. Cap space is kind of, foozy-woozy. How Broncos are screwed at the cap, right, Scott? They can't do anything. Well, few moves over here, a few moves over there, you got cap space. Draft picks, though, those are much more valuable.
They were in a good spot to manipulate the cap, which we had been saying for 2 years. If they want to reset this whole thing, they're set up to do it in 2024.
Yep.
And they still have more moves they can make. Cortland Sutton with Garrett Bowles. I think those are the 2 big ones that are still left. DJ Williams. I'm getting my guys confused. DJ Jones, the defensive tackle. There's still some maneuverability there. So there's for all of the questionable moves that we've talked about with George Paton, the cap management has been pretty good, except for, the Russell Wilson one was tough. Mm-hmm. But you could still afford to eat the Russell Wilson one based on the previous good moves, and quarterbacks are expensive. Lawrence comes in, he says, which quarterback do you think is starting? Do we want to say on day 1 or like day 4? Who ends up, being the starter for the majority of the season? Dylan Von Arks and I are betting $1 on it. I got Zach Wilson.
It's going to have to be Bo Nix, barring an injury. You have the 3rd oldest quarterback ever drafted in the history of the NFL. 61 starts, which is far and away the most starts of any quarterback in college football history. And he is considered to be essentially a coach on the field, extremely intelligent. Sean Payton mentioned, giving him the 3-package offensive install and then him coming back and just passing that test with flying colors. And you don't take a quarterback at 12 overall with the room the way it is for the Broncos without, that guy being the quarterback. Now, if Wilson takes it because Nix gets dinged or, Stidham's the best guy, I guess I could see that happening. But all the factors don't point to Nix being this like raw needs time kind of guy. He's had experience. Sean Payton handpicked him. It would be a monumental upset if Nix wasn't the day 1 starter.
And even those guys, Nick, are starting anyway. Those raw needs time guys, Anthony Richardson, started day 1.
Yeah.
So, Lawrence, I actually think Zach Wilson is the least likely to be the starter. So if you feel good about Zach Wilson, find a sports book and put that $1 on it because you'll get pretty good odds.
Yeah.
You won't have to bet 1-to-1 on that. Zach Wilson being the starter, I think he's the least likely to be the starting quarterback for the Denver Broncos. 1 year left on his deal. Plus we've seen him play.
Yeah.
I think Jarrett Stidham is more likely. And I'm not counting Ben DiNucci. I think his days are kind of numbered. One of them is DiNucci or Stidham. Do you want to save some money or do you want to keep the floor higher in the room? One of them's expendable, and then you might be able to re-sign him to the practice squad on that. So for me, Bo Nix is your starting quarterback. He ends up taking the most snaps and throwing the most passes for the Denver Broncos in 2024. Coach Chris, welcome in. Thank you for the support, my friend. He says, good morning. Overall, what a weekend. Our draft, the trade, our undrafted free agent seems solid. While this year is going to be rough, it would appear we took steps forward. It seems like Sean has ties to the Utes and the Ducks.
Pac-12 stuff. I mean, George Paton has ties there. You got the area scouts a little closer. And I think if there's any 2 programs to pick from over the last 5 years out of the Pac-12, it's probably Utah, now Big 12, and the Ducks, now Big 10. So, yeah, definitely seems like they leaned heavily into the Pac-12 well this season. Kind of sad to see the Pac-12 go away as best, most exciting season I can ever remember them having.
On a high note.
Yeah, it was. I guess the only negative was that USC was absolutely cheeks around Caleb Williams, which was a disappointment when you have a quarterback of that talent to be that putrid around him.
The rest of the Pac-12 rejoiced in.
Yeah, it's just, you're USC for crimini's sake. How can you be that bad around a superstar quarterback prospect? But I digress. Yeah, overall fun weekend, and we're gonna see what happens. I mean, I know that you might roll your eyes, Scott, but Todd McShay kind of had a viral clip where he talked with he said 12 front office lead executives or upper executives and coaches, and 10 of them said that Bo Nix shouldn't have gone before day 2, and that McShay used the pick and called it arrogant from Sean Payton. Now, what does that mean to me? I think it means that Sean thinks he can bring in any kind of quarterback as long as they can run his system. They're going to be great. I think that's what McShay was saying there, but only time will tell. And again, I didn't think Nix was a 12th overall pick, but that doesn't matter. And you should listen to Sean Payton before you should listen to me. I'm going to tell you what I see, but I'm only dealing with 55% of the puzzle pieces, right?
And
where Sean is a lot more.
If you didn't get Nix, what were you going to do?
I was perfectly content living in the world that you kick the can for a year. I feel like Nix is a caliber of quarterback prospect that Denver, I didn't expect him to be very good this season. I think you'd have a chance at a equivalent next season.
God,
So
I would be real interested down the line to have an off the record conversation with George Payton and have him to know, because we've talked about Sean Payton being impatient. We have, and that was one of the main reasons I said I think he goes quarterback. He's gonna have to get a quarterback in this draft. He has to. It's Sean Payton.
Yep.
He's in charge. Coach Chris follows up. He says, no way we keep 5 quarterbacks on the team, which stay on the active roster, which fall to the practice squad, and which are cut or traded. Now, they've changed a rule about the quarterback position. I think you can basically have a 49-man active roster now. If you keep 3 quarterbacks, you don't have to flex guys on game day. So keep 3. The question, Chris, is do you want to try and save a couple bucks on Jarrett Stidham? If you don't, then Stidham makes a roster. He's your best backup. Zach Wilson is an intriguing prospect. Bo Nix is your number 1. He's not going anywhere. That's the for sure. The only for sure I've got is Bo Nix is on the roster. And I think Ben DiNucci is cut and tried to sign back to the practice squad. So I'll go Nix, Stidham, and Wilson 1, 2, 3.
I think the rule is you can elevate a quarterback from the practice squad, and it doesn't count against. That's a good question. I don't know.
Unlimited. They've changed some rules. We'll have to look it up. Apologies. They've changed some rules with the practice squad where you get unlimited flexes, which is basically, well, then it's not on a practice squad anymore. He's basically your active roster.
Yeah. And also the question then will be from the contract wise, Zach Wilson for Stidham. I don't think Stidham or Zach Wilson's contract is fully guaranteed either. So it might be keeping DiNucci as that third.
It would be because it was still his rookie contract. It's just that the Jets ate some of the money.
That's what I thought it stayed with the team that signed him previously. I'd be curious.
No, just the dead cap on it with the signing bonus that comes in. If you picked up his salary, the salary on it would still be fully guaranteed because so whatever you decided to take on would be guaranteed. So you probably didn't take on much. Just be 2 or 3. I think they took on $2 million, maybe $2 or $3 million, but you'd eat some dead cap on that one.
So depends on how much. I think it's Zach Wilson versus Jarrett Stidham there for that quarterback too, and what the Broncos can save there. I mean, we'll see how it plays out. But coming back, we got Miguel says, how do you guys feel about Denver going into the season compared to a week ago? I feel like they addressed the glaring holes. Still don't want to get my hopes up, but pleased with the draft. I'll need to see it to believe it still, because honestly, Scott, the biggest thing for me is I just don't think the defense is very good. I think the offense brings a floor, but you brought in John Franklin Myers, you brought in Cody Barton, you brought in Jones at safety, but you lost Jewell, you lost Justin Simmons. I think the defense, it was bottom 10 last year outside of the unbelievable, we hadn't seen in 33 years turnover run that they had. Pretty poor defense. And I think on paper, they're still not going to be a very good defense. So I think it's probably still a team. If I had to set the line now I think Bo Nix raises the over-under. For me, I'd probably set it at 6.5, going from 5.5 to 6.5. But I'm not a big fan of the defense. I think it's on paper, it's still a bottom 10 unit in the NFL.
That said, where would you say from the end of last season, because I love this question, Miguel, the Denver Broncos have improved the most on paper? Where do you think from the end of last year?
Where the Broncos have improved the most on paper from the end of last season. I guess it would have to be the defensive line still because of
That's
where you're
where I go
coming from.
to.
It was horrible last season.
Mhm.
You add a pass rusher, so another one of quality to the room. You bring in Roach. You bring in John Franklin Myers. You still don't have, in my opinion, true like difference makers, but you raise the floor of the position so much, that second string of guys.
Right.
So I think it's probably the defensive line, but you went from a bottom 3 defensive front, including edges and interior defensive line last season, to now bottom 10. And I don't think you have any true difference makers on that unit.
Yeah, I think, how do I feel, Miguel? I feel actually better about the defense just because your defensive line has gotten better. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, we've talked for as much, gruff as Russell Wilson had. He had decent numbers. I mean, he had 26 touchdowns against 9 interceptions. Will Bo Nix throw for 26 touchdowns against 9 interceptions? Can he beat those numbers in year one? Can the Denver Broncos beat those passing numbers in year one? They were 19th overall in scoring offense. Will they improve on that with a rookie quarterback or Jarrett Stidham? Maybe, but it's no guarantee. Year one, again, we've talked about now you've got a 3-year window of I have to keep showing improvement to be winning in year 3 if I'm going to keep my job as Sean Payton. And that's what I'm banking on with Bo Nix. I don't necessarily have to see an immediate return this year. And if you do, well, what about CJ Stroud? That'd be great. But that's kind of the anomaly. Going in, you think there could be a little bit of regression on the offensive side of the ball. But there's a plan. There's a plan in place here. As opposed to, Miguel, Russell Wilson stinks. We don't have a first-round draft pick to go with it. And now we're in cap hell. Ouch. Well, now you've got your 2025 first-round pick. You've got your quarterback of the future. And you've got an S-ton of money in 2025. The outlook, it looks good. Is this team better? Was it 8-9 last year? Is this team better? Maybe. But the track is definitely better.
Yeah, there's a direction now, and it's all in on if Bo Nix becomes a top 10 caliber quarterback. The reality of historical precedent, the data from the last 15 years is that we won't probably know if Nix is going to be a superstar or not after the first year, but we're going to know if he belongs. Typically, the guys who don't belong, it's really rare to have a guy come in and play bottom 5, bottom 10 level after 16 is typically the number, but I'll go 16 to 20 starts and then come out of nowhere and become a perennial top 10 guy. I mean, over the last 15 years, that top 10 mark, Scott, not just, okay quarterback, but like good franchise quarterback. The only one I can think of off the top of my head that went from putrid to star is Josh Allen. So Nix, again, 24, third oldest quarterback ever drafted, 61 starts, should start this season. And odds are he's not going to be bottom 5. I think, especially with Sean Payton calling the shots, he'll probably be somewhere middle of the pack. And in that case, you're not going to be picking at one of the top quarterbacks in a lesser class. He'll have earned himself another season, rightfully so, if that's the case. But I don't think, asking for him to be non-bottom 10 quarterback this season is an unfair ask given the list of quarterbacks. But we will see. Only time will tell. And again, the one thing you should feel good about Broncos country, even though a lot of people will say, oh, maybe it was a reach for Bo Nix, I wouldn't have taken it here, this team, that team. All these teams aren't running Sean Payton's offense. All these teams have different asks for what they want from their quarterbacks. Sean Payton likes a little athleticism at the quarterback, some power options. He likes smart quarterbacks. He gives them a lot on their plate, not only pre-snap, Scott, but week to week as well. I mean, just changing the game plans around. And it sounds like out of any of the quarterbacks in this class, not named Caleb Williams, who apparently was just an maestro in terms of the taking information and putting it on the whiteboard since he's been in like 8th grade even. But Nix was an extremely intelligent professional, and you're going to be able to execute week by week shifts in game plans, pre-snap stuff, give him all the really complex play calls that Broncos quarterback struggled with the last couple seasons with Russell Wilson and the wristband gate.
We have to go to the wristband. We will. Ouch.
Yeah.
It was not a happy relationship last year.
Yep. And also, I only use recent examples because the game has shifted so dramatically in the last 15 years.
The eyes are really going to be on Bryce Young this year. CJ Stroud hit. Okay. Will Levis is the maybe. He's kind of in there. And Anthony Richardson showed flashes, but we'll see. And then Bryce Young is, all right, you get one more year, and then we're going to have to be thinking about quarterback again.
Yeah. I think that's about historical data, 15 years, given how much the game has changed. I don't know how predictive, looking at a quarterback from the 80s or the 90s translates to today's games. So I think 15 years is more than a broad enough sample size to carry that over for predictive power. Because that's,
the pressure that you're allowed to put on quarterbacks, the hits, the seven, how much they play. Most quarterbacks now they're not really two-sport athletes as much as they used to be by any stretch of the imagination. They're playing in passing leagues 12 months a year. They're more ready to play when they get to the league now, for sure.
And also what they're asking of them is simplified. Mike Shanahan said you needed 3 seasons, but now with the concepts and stuff, they are more half-field reads, simplifying the menu for the quarterback to get out there. Compared to what we saw, years ago, where it took them going from college football, handed it off 40 times a game, to now where they're throwing it around the yard. It's just they're more ready out of the gate historically. Troy Boer comes in, says John Franklin Myers might make the draft seem better, but I'm excited for the season after the draft, which is all I ask. Love some UFAs. Yeah, we'll see what happens with the undrafted free agents. Again, a lot of people in the NFL have said that this is one of the worst classes, at least at the back end, that we've seen for a bit, one of the smallest underclassmen groups that we've seen in a while. And you had one more year of the COVID extension. So a lot of guys who would have been your typical, day 3 undrafted free agents said, hey, I get a chance to raise my stock and get paid at the college level. Let's do that instead. So I don't think that this is going to be a banner year for undrafted free agents. Next year, it's supposed to be a historical size draft class. I already know that the Senior Bowl and the Shrine Bowl guys are like, oh my God, we have 300 extra people that we have to get through this year compared to seasons past. So next year I'm excited for, but we'll see what happens with the undrafted free agents this year.
Yeah, with all of the old guys coming in, the Shrine Bowl had their record for most guys getting drafted. It was over 50, I think. So congratulations to them. We already know the Senior Bowl puts about 85 to 90 guys in the NFL draft. So might have to get out to the Shrine Bowl next year. But thank you, Troy. Certainly appreciate it. Lance comes in. He says, good morning, fellas. I took this draft as somewhat of an endorsement for Alex Pelcheski as a swing developmental tackle. What do you guys think? Lance, I think it's hard to tell what the Denver Broncos think about offensive tackles based on the draft because they don't ever draft any. Love you some UDFAs. Maybe that's what this is. I don't know. It's really weird. I keep saying I'm going to do this, and I only think of it when we're live, but I want to go back and chart draft picks across all the teams. There cannot be another team in the NFL that has not drafted an offensive tackle in 7 years. There just can't be.
No, I can't imagine that. And I would say that if we're setting odds for Denver's first overall pick in 2025, given you have Sean Payton here, given McGlinchey's contract comes one that's a little bit more fungible. I guess that's the word. You can move on from it. And then Garrett Bowles' last year. Offensive tackle probably has to be far and away the number 1 odds pick for Denver. It kind of hurts my heart because next year is going to be a banner year for defensive line, edge, and defensive tackles. How it looks right now, obviously, we got to let the games play out, but offensive tackles got to be pretty high. And we'll see what happens with Alex Palcheski with the Broncos here. Even if he is the 4th offensive tackle with some guard ability as an undrafted free agent, that's a heck of a get. So yeah, we'll see what happens with Alex out of University of Illinois there. We got Coach Chris coming in again, saying Tony Scheffler rocked the draft, took a look at the tight end. We got an undrafted free agent. I like what I saw. He's a dollar store Gronk. Love the running back we got as UDFA as well. Yeah, we'll have a chance to go over the UDFAs. It's going to take a while to let the dust settle there and have everything announced officially. But I do want to go over the rest of the Broncos draft class.
We did miss Jake here real quick too.
Okay, yeah.
Jake says, who's the odd man out at running back now? Samaje Perine, he was great in the pass game. What about outside corner? Drain, Moss, McMillan, Wallace. Perine now in the 4th year. the contract isn't guaranteed for Javonte Williams, but I saw some talk about that yesterday on the MHH pod about him possibly not making. I think you give Javonte Williams one more year for sure coming off that injury. I want to see Javonte Williams 2 years removed from that injury this year for sure. P. Ryan, maybe. Do you take – you could probably save a little bit of money there. McMillan, undrafted free agent, good story. But, do you for sure end up keeping a 5th-round pick? Probably. 5th-round pick probably makes the roster. I would imagine you keep him. So P. Ryan makes sense to me, Jake. I think that's a good call.
P. Ryan seems like the most likely guy out because of the money you can save from him. But I will say that there's a lot of assumptions that Jaleel McLaughlin will make the roster. And everything I've heard is that that is very much not the case. He did have some explosiveness last year, but Scott, again, you can roll your eyes on this one. But in an era of simulated pressures, defenses are doing such a good job of only sending 4 or 5 guys, but getting free rushers. And that puts an unbelievable amount of stress and responsibility on your running back to be a +1 in your pass protection packages. And McLaughlin, last season, he was downright terrible in pass protection. Now, it's not fully his fault, what he was asked to do in college, not so much that kind of guy, but 5'8", 185 pounds. He just, got engulfed, destroyed, whipped by free rushers far too often. It is a massive schematic disadvantage because when you're sending him out there, the opposing team can be like, listen, we're not even going to account for him as part of the pass protection package. So we're going to do what we can to isolate him and take advantage of him. And if other teams are doing that, and you're also not a dynamic, flex out into space pass catcher, which we have not seen from McLaughlin, part of that might be Russell Wilson's struggles in the quick game, it's a really hard ask for the Broncos. So even though he had some explosive touches last season, if you are not competent in pass protection or receiving as a running back, and you're not bringing special teams value as a running back 3, you're on the chopping block, as you should be. So I think P. Ryan's the most likely here, but Broncos brought in undrafted free agent running back Watson from Memphis. He brings a little bit more special teams receiving ability. Obviously, Estime is safe as well, but I will say, P. Ryan's most likely, but McLaughlin is far from a sure thing. It's kind of the Philip Lindsay syndrome where it's like, yeah, when you have the quarterback under center and he's handing it off, that's fine. But for what you bring, you need to be a little bit more diversified in your overall abilities. And we haven't seen that from McLaughlin yet.
And if you just look at his usage last year, in the middle of the first middle third of the season, 21 snaps on offense, 21 snaps on offense, 16. After week 7, he had 6 games where he only had single-digit offensive snaps. So his usage went down. It went back up like the second to last game of the season, but that for me was like a tryout
evaluation.
Once you bench Russell Wilson, you are in tryout mode. So Jake, P. Ryan still makes sense to me, but again, I agree with the idea that Jaleel McLaughlin's not safe.
Yeah. So we'll see. And let's get into the Broncos draft class here. We'll have plenty of time to do that. Broncos pick at 76 overall. Jonah Ellis, edge rusher from Utah, a little bit small for the position. I think is worth pointing out, not a massive hulking player by any means, but really productive at Utah this last season. Before going down with a shoulder injury, he did end up leading all of Power 5 football in sacks per game at 1.2. Now, granted, the quality of the offensive tackles in the Pac-12, there were some good ones this year, but they were kind of a little bit consolidated, Scott, right? Outside of what you saw at Washington, Oregon, and Arizona with Morgan, I saw some pretty horrific offensive tackle play out of the Pac-12 this season. And Ellis definitely feasted on guys who are not going to do much in the league, but still very productive player. I love the unrelenting ability too. He plays with his, not to be overly cliche, but hair on fire kind of guy, and a lot of sacks on secondary effort, which is a reason he's a round 3 pick, not a round 1 pick. You'd rather have guys who win clean immediately, but there is value for guys who have a lot of moves, a really good inside spin move. I think that's his signature, of course, and shows a lot of good usage with his hands. That tends to translate pretty well. Now, I don't think he's got the frame to add a lot of mass. I think he's always going to be a little bit of an issue as far as an edge setter. But again, round 3, second wave kind of edge rusher, maybe can do some edge 2 stuff if he's opposite of a superhero type. But again, I think the pass rush ability makes a lot of sense and comes from a family of pass rushers and defensive linemen too. His dad was a first round pick, played for the Broncos back in like 95 or something like that. I don't remember the exact year, but I'm sure some of the Broncos country that's a little bit older than me maybe remembers. And he has 2 brothers that have played in the league as well. So he's going to know what it means to come in and be a professional. So excited about that. And Scott, I don't know if you have the data in front of you, but some really unbelievable agility drills.
That's what, if you saw me, my eyebrow raising on that, I don't think he was NFL Combine. I think he was Pro Day, but a 6'6", 3 cone is elite.
Yes.
And we do make some stereotypes based on the sticker on the helmet every once in a while. You're not alone. I don't want a quarterback from USC. They're all busts, or from Ohio State. And mine's usually on the positive side of things. I see it, an Alabama defender, I usually perk up just a little bit. But if I've got a front 7 guy playing for Kyle Whittingham, he's going to be tough. He's going to be tough. He might be a little undersized. I don't typically worry about a Kyle Whittingham outside linebacker edge not sticking his head in there. And that's a bias on my point. Doesn't mean I'm wrong.
And one thing I also like about him is that despite not being big framed, only 6'2", 240 pounds, he's got length, 33-inch arm length. So sometimes as a pass rusher, that leverage is just natural for him. He can, not forklift guys because he doesn't have like that level of power, but he just wins leverage naturally with the length he possesses. So,
are you old enough to remember where the forklift came from?
No.
Do you know where that started? He like invented. It was a defensive lineman named Jumpy Gathers. His nephew, I think it was his nephew, Clifton Gathers, was a pretty highly rated prospect. But Jumpy Gathers was one of those like 6'7" defensive linemen with just ungodly strength, and he just lift guys up and throw them into the quarterbacks. That was where the forklift came from. So the originator of the forklift is Jumpy Gathers.
We'll talk about that with Deontay Walker out of Kentucky next year. 6'6", 340 pounds, and unbelievable. But yeah, Ellis and the Broncos hit a position of value. We're going to have a chance to dig into these guys, maybe do a show-by-show with a lot of these guys as we watch them, Scott. But my first thought here is Broncos don't have a superstar on the defensive line, especially in the edge rushing room. But you got a lot of these tier 2, tier 3 guys. Rotations is big. But also, I'm wondering if we see a post-camp, post-OTA moves where the Broncos do something like package one of their pass rushers and a 7th-round pick and get a 4th-round pick or a 5th-round pick. We saw it with Malik Reed a couple seasons ago, and you have 2 edge rushers in your room right now that are approaching the last year of their contract in Jonathan Cooper and Baron Browning. You are not sure what's going to happen with Drew Sanders. You obviously brought in John Franklin Myers. You have Nick Bonito here. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Denver ends up, a small move, but a move nonetheless, maybe shipping out one of these edge rushers to a team that has a need for, an edge 3 or edge 4.
So call your shot. Who would it be?
I think on paper, I say Jonathan Cooper because he has a more known quantity, a little bit safer, but also lacks the upside of a Baron Browning. So I would say Cooper. And I think it would be similar to, Cooper and 2026 7th for a 2025 5th, something like that. You move some of the salary there as well. Maybe you eat the whole contract and you get a 4th instead. But that is something I think is possible. Given how many cooks you have in the kitchen right now. You also have Thomas Nkumu, you paid a lot of money for last season as an undrafted free agent. And again, 2 guys that are going to be last year of contract. So I'm on edge low end trade watch right now.
Yeah, I think again, I talk about bias. I think we get biased by where they were drafted to a certain extent sometimes, because you immediately think, okay, Baron Browning's got more trade value. At least I think that. And then you look up Jonathan Cooper. You're like, okay, we know Jonathan Cooper does a job. He put up 8.5 sacks, 72 tackles, and this wasn't Malik Reed. You know, I came here when Malik Reed was in his last season, and since I've been covering the Broncos, and y'all were like, okay, he's got to go. He's got to go. He's got to go. He's a cherry picker. You know, he's just kind of putting up numbers, but not really getting anything done because he's getting coverage sacks and that type of stuff. Jonathan Cooper can be very effective. I think he's a better overall player right now than Nick Bonito is. But Nick Bonito was drafted higher, so you think, he might have more trade value. So when I'm thinking, it's like, okay, well, what are you going to trade for Jonathan Cooper? That's my initial reaction. I'm like, all right, I think he's more valuable than I'm giving him credit for.
He's solid. He's really solid, and I think the reason is you kind of know what you have in Cooper. There is the unknown, and if Browning puts it together, he's a more valuable asset. But that's risky, of course, because he's been injured. But I think you're selling low on the potential there compared to Cooper, who I think you kind of have an idea of what he is. Also, I think Cooper is a lot more similar to Ellis than Browning. You know, the angular frame, tenacity, not really, super duper bendy by any means or overly, twitched up. I think that Cooper is the one that I come around to in that scenario. But really, I mean, Scott, it'd be for me, whichever one I can get the best value for. Honestly, I think you can, if one of them gets me a 4th round pick and the other one gets me a 6th, I'm probably shipping off the guy who gives me the 4th, especially if it's 2025 and next year's class is as deep as many people are talking about. Moving forward, obviously the Broncos trade up for Franklin, really productive there at Oregon, really skinny player. I think I'm going to be curious to see how he handles going up against press, especially if he's going to be lining up not on the interior, not having a two-way go that a slot would. Luckily, he can be a Z, so he can move around some, not on the line of scrimmage, but I have questions about the ability to handle physicality that you don't get the benefit of spacing at the NFL level, as well as physicality at the catch point. 170 pounds, played like he was 170, 175, fought the ball a little bit, but explosive player, can do some stuff down the field. And again, talked about him earlier. If he can just end up being your 3rd or 4th wide receiver, that is a good get for what receivers are going for right now in the market.
Oh, for sure. If you can get a 4th round pick on a productive number 3, number 4, that's absolutely a good value pick. Going back to highlighting the Jonah Ellis agility numbers. Now, again, pro day versus NFL combine, it's not a complete controlled environment. So take that in mind. But you talk about the pro day for Jonah Ellis with a short shuttle of 4.17 and a 3 cone of 6.69. He's 80 pounds heavier, 70 pounds heavier than Troy Franklin, and beat him on both of those numbers of 6.9 at the combine for Franklin and 4.31 on the shuttle. So again, the quick burst, you say kind of a one-trick pony for Franklin. That could be why. At 175 pounds, I'd like to see a little bit better side to side. But the burst is there, the straight line is there, but the agility numbers on Jonah Ellis they're eye popping.
Yeah. Again, small player, played off ball linebacker and then moved to edge. So there's a little bit of the hybridism there as well. I think in theory, maybe you can talk about him being somebody who can do some stuff in coverage as well. But yeah, we'll see with Franklin. Got up to 183 for the pro day. Would love to see him at 6'2", get into 180 to 190 consistently. But yeah, he was a super duper productive, really highly rated recruit as well. So again, hopefully to add a little bit more strength, be a little bit better with the route running, and he's going to have another reason he fell, Scott. You're talking about your 3rd, 4th wide receiver. Didn't offer much of anything in special teams, which again, Nick, people don't care about special teams, but it matters, especially when you're talking depth down there. It does matter for your team.
Well, if you're a number 1 at Oregon, you're not playing special teams.
That's true, but the traits don't lend itself well to special teams as well. He's not a hulking guy and overly physical, what you're looking for those gunner types. But we'll see. He's somebody, again, I think that's a good pick for the Broncos considering the value. I think he went at the tail end of where I thought his value was. Did want to talk about the Broncos' final 2 picks too here down the stretch. Chris Abrams drain. The Broncos take cornerback out of Missouri. One of the most productive ball production player. I don't want to use production twice, but like his ability to put hands on the football has been unbelievable. I believe he had the most pass defended of any defensive back over the last 3 seasons. Former pretty highly rated recruit as well. Opposite, obviously, Enos, or no, what's his?
Rakestraw.
Rakestraw. I almost said Sanderstill. That's the wrong one.
That's Michigan.
But, yeah.
All those MIs up north.
Yeah. But Chris Abram, solid time. I mean, pretty small, 5'11", 180. I worry about cornerbacks that small, given what we're seeing, how much teams are throwing the quick game and forcing cornerbacks to tackle in space. He also doesn't have tremendous arm length, Scott, 31 inches. Probably another reason he fell to the 5th round here, but competitive player. I think he maximizes his overall skill set. And again, talking a 5th round pick, I'll be curious to see what the special teams upside is for him. But given how much he put his hands on the football, I mean, there is a floor there for somebody who is fluid and finds the ball.
Right. We talk about the line graph all the time. Up this axis, you've got football playmaking ability. On the bottom line, on the x-axis, you talk about the athletic traits. He's up high. He's high left. Really good football player. Not great athletically traits-wise when it comes to comparing him to other NFL corners. So you got a football player. See what you can do with him.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he does here. Maybe he's somebody who can move to safety. Maybe he ends up being a slot type too. I mean, it's honestly easier to hide poor tacklers on the boundary nowadays than it is from the slot and the safety spot, of course. But yeah, lack of size will be worth watching, especially with the hip drop stuff, Scott. I mean, your cornerbacks need to be able to tackle in space, and we'll be able to see he's feisty. It's not a matter of want to. But again, just a little bit thin and the lacking of length. Actually, Scott, I don't know if you saw this, but MathBomb did released a tweet that asked, like, okay, as far as Pro Bowl level players, what is the most important trait of any of the players that has like the highest correlation to the good players have this?
I mean, for me, it's the agilities. It'd be the shuttle or the 3-cone.
It's really actually arm length at cornerback. The short arm cornerbacks don't tend to be good at the NFL level. So
because there's a baseline that they have to have in their 3-cone and their shuttles to even be in the conversation.
Yep. But obviously there's a cutoff, as you mentioned, baseline. But the arm length is an interesting one there for superstar Pro Bowl cornerbacks. So 31 inches. You're probably not getting that in the 5th round anyway. But finally, we're running obviously long here. We're at almost the very end. My favorite pick of the draft in terms of value was Notre Dame running back Audric Estime. He ran a really poor 40, Scott, at the combine. I believe it was a 4.71. But this is a rocked up player, only 19, 20 years old, and had an unbelievably productive year at Notre Dame this last season. He is got good vision, good balance, and looks to punish players as well. I think that hopefully there's a little bit more meat on the bone as far as his ability as a pass catcher, but is without a doubt a trend-setting kind of back, a tone-setting kind of back. He's going to be physical, and he is going to maximize his ability. Now, I am curious about his ability to make a man miss. I am curious about what it looks like when things are muddy in the backfield more than they were at Notre Dame, because Notre Dame had an awesome offensive line this last year, where, he was already 2.5 yards down the field before even having to think about, having a guy to deal with most of the time. But for the 5th round, to add a running back of his stature, size, physicality, vision, I think is a hell of a pick. So I'm really excited about Audric Estime resetting the room a little bit contract-wise and getting another running back of size, mass, physicality to the room.
Maybe I'm better at comps with running backs. I'm terrible at it with quarterbacks. I saw Keith ask what a comp was for Bo Nix. I'm like, I'm just bad at those. But as soon as I see Estime and I see these numbers, the first name that pops into my mind was Rudy Johnson. I watched Rudy Johnson at Auburn, And he was this weeble wobble of a running back who looked like he couldn't run sub 4.7 with the wind behind his back. And he averaged 27 yards per touchdown run. And he had 16 in 2000 for Auburn. Because he wasn't all that fast, he ends up going in the 4th round of the Cincinnati Bengals. And he had, 6,000 yards in his career, including 3 straight 1,300 plus double-digit touchdowns. We talk about it all the time. If you take this out of context, I'm going to sound like an idiot. Sound like an idiot all the time anyway, but speed is overrated. In context, Rudy Johnson is one of the people that helped me come to that conclusion, where you had, especially those, he was with Corey Dillon for a little while too. I think Corey Dillon's this big, strong. It's more important to be able to break a tackle than it is to run sub 4.5. If you can't break a tackle, you're going down on first contact. You break a tackle, if I can shed that first line of contact, by the time the 4-4 guys can change directions and catch me, I got 40 yards. So you're going to have it. And someone brought it up yesterday. Good luck tackling Javonte Williams and Estime for 4 quarters. Good luck.
Yeah, without a doubt. And some other things I really love about him, some stats that I think translate pretty well, Scott, from the college level, is the yards after contact per attempt. And out of the running backs that had at least 130 rush attempts last year, Estime was 5th in college football, but 3rd if you include only Division I, Power 5 kind of guys at 4.27 yards after contact per attempt. He also had the 7th most forced missed tackles at 64, had 38 rushes of 10 plus yards, yards per attempt 6.4. I believe he was one of the highest in yards per attempt last season. And that's despite not being a home run hitter per se. So again, a lot of that has to do with the physicality of the offensive line, but even if your offensive line is winning, you still have to have some semblance of vision, patience, tempo as a runner. And I think Estime brings all of that. So I'm excited to see what he brings. And he is somebody, along with Bo Nix, one of my favorite traits from Bo Nix, and you're really adding it with both these guys here, is just toughness and physicality. You're looking to, you don't always get it from the skill position guys. You're definitely getting it from these two. They are muscle guys who are going to look to beat you up.
Yeah. You talked about the other guys being kind of light. Okay. Well, you got your power here. I can deal with some light wide receivers if I'm going with 225, 230 pounds of running back up the middle. And Gary Palmer, good to see you. GLP says, my favorites. You're our favorites. Did you guys rank the draft? As a fan, I'm delighted, but your analysts might feel different. I didn't rank, grade, and it's hard for me to do that. I'll talk about, did you fill needs or not? Because that's all that draft grades are the day after, the week after the draft. The rest of it has to come with hindsight.
Yep. And,
do I like the Bo Nix pick for the Denver Broncos? I think it was a pick you had to make. I really do. If you're Sean Payton and he's not going through next season with Jarrett Stidham and Zach Wilson. He wanted a quarterback. He needed a quarterback. And after the Atlanta Falcons took Michael Penix at 8, you're not sure that Nix was going to get past 13, so you couldn't trade back. So I understand it. And then I feel like you really did a good job of meeting some needs, especially on the defensive line and edge. I like the Jonas Ellis pick probably better than the Nick Benito pick. I think he's a more versatile defender. Big running back, cornerback, wide receiver, and you get a developmental center at the end of the draft. So it was a solid draft, and you kept all your 2025 picks.
That is a great point, Scott. You got a shot at quarterback, and let's say things absolutely blow up next season, and it seems Nix is playing at a bottom 5 level. Well, you know what that probably means with the talent around him? You're probably picking top 5 next year if he's that level. Obviously, you have to see what it looks like. Maybe he gets hurt. You can't say that definitively unless you have the tape to go with it. But worst case scenario, which I don't think happens, but he shows that he is not the guy. The 12th overall pick is not so detrimental that you are sunk going a different direction again. So I love keeping all those picks and doing that. And we'll see what happens this year with Bo Nix. I think Nix is going to come in and be a solid contributor and a good fit for Sean Payton. And you really had no choice than to empower your coach. And I guess I can say this now, Scott, as well. I had a off the record talk with some folks. I guess we can put it on the record now. Following the combine, that Sean Payton had a dinner with a lot of the more prominent folks in the media in Indianapolis, and came out of the combine being Sean Payton is hellbent on coming out of this draft class with his quarterback. Not surprising. And he ends up getting his third guy. So we will see. Sean Payton, undoubtedly an elevator of quarterback talent. This is the first chance we've seen him make a premium investment in the draft. So jury is out on the evaluator, but you had no choice but to empower and let your coach take the guy he wanted. So here we go. You're on the clock now, Peyton. Hopefully it works out.
Yep, 3 years. You've got 3 years to show improvement. And again, the question earlier, how do you feel about the going into the season compared to a week ago from Miguel coming in with some stars? He asked us earlier. I feel like there is a path, and the upside is definitely there. When you're looking at, the low point for me was the Nathaniel Hackett, Russell Wilson disaster. When you don't have a first round pick and you're sitting there, you're like, what do I have to look forward to? Well, I got all kinds of things to look forward to. I got a young quarterback of the future. I got a ton of money in 2025. Those are 2 big ones right there. Those are good. Those are the good ones. Yeah. So again, it was a good week for Broncos country.
Yeah. We will see what happens. If you hit on the quarterback, it's all gravy, but the entire draft class is going to come down to whether or not it stinks, because, the other stuff matters too. But really, it's going to come down to if you made the right call with Bo Nix, because...
And that's how it is whenever you don't have a quarterback. It all depends on if you get it right. So this isn't necessarily about Bo Nix. This is about the Denver Broncos not having a quarterback. And there's risk every time you pick a new one. Yep. But there's also hope when you pick a new one. And that's what Broncos have now. And there hasn't been a lot of that going around here after the initial euphoria of a Russell Wilson trade and Sean Payton getting hired. And then the reality hits in that, okay, this isn't necessarily working. Now there's hope again.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
And I'm of the opinion that you probably know if Nix is going to be at least a viable starter after 1 year. You should really know if he's the guy after 2 years. And the 2025 class on paper, that quarterback doesn't look good. 2026, though, right now we got a ways to go, of course, but 2026 looks like another good class again. So if Nix doesn't hit, you're going to have a chance again in 2026, probably with the new regime. I know you keep saying 3 years, Scott, but if it doesn't work out, I think there's a chance after 2 years if it's really ugly. And you're that far away still from the Chiefs and Chargers, but we have a lot to go before.
That goes for everybody. If you go 2-15 in consecutive years, you're probably not going to have a job.
Exactly. But it lines up with how the quarterback classes stack up to. You have 2 years now to take a shot, and we'll see what happens. But right now, all you can say is that Sean Payton got his guy. He's excited about it, and there's nothing wrong with being optimistic about that. It doesn't mean that, Scott and I are going to, change our evaluation of it, but you empowered your head coach, and we'll see how it plays out. But any final thoughts, Scott? Obviously a whirlwind of a week. We talked a lot. We're going to have a chance to probably go pick by pick on a lot of these guys, as we're now coming to the slow part of the off season, but final discussion point with the overall draft.
No, mine is to say thank you to Broncos country, like DeHaan, who came in, Michael Riccio opening us up, Keith Brugman, Troy Morris, Lawrence several times, Coach Chris a few times, Miguel. We had Troy, Lance, Jake. We had and Gary Palmer, and then finally the sunrise today. Michael Riccio closing us out. We'll see you tonight on Building the Broncos. Should be another interesting show.
I think it should be Huddle Up. But because Monday night, right?
It is Monday. I had Tuesday in my head already because, you work 7 days a week. You forget what day it is. So MHH pod. That's right.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I'm with you there. But guys, we got to get on out of here. We appreciate you. Make sure you're following Scott and I on Twitter. Scott is at Scout Kennedy. I'm at Nick Kendall MHH. Also follow us at Mile High Huddle if you haven't done so yet. Facebook.com/Mile High Huddle pod and Facebook.com/Mile High Huddle. You can find us there as well. If you're listening after the fact, or you listen to podcasts as much as I do, because I get a lot of time, doing data analysis and chart reviews and putting together documents for my other job, make sure you find us on Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple Podcasts. Leave us a 5-star review. That helps us a heck of a lot. And of course, as it says here, subscribe to our show, Mile High Huddle, over here on YouTube. Like the channel and share on your social media platforms. It's always super helpful for us. So appreciate everyone. Scott and I will see you again Wednesday morning. I'll see you tomorrow night. But until then, go Broncos. And choose compassion and kindness, of course, as well. Of course. Peace.